I used to drink, like crank back like a Celsius, right before I would teach at 7 a.m. or something on a Sunday. And the anxiety that I would have before teaching my class, even during, was through the roof. But I had convinced myself that there's no way that I could possibly teach a class without having some sort of caffeine. I was like, there's no way, I can't do it. It's too early in the morning. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. on a Sunday. I need to do something. And what I'm trying to do now is focus a little bit more on like habit stacking. And so one
Atomic
of the things,
Habits.
Yes.
Is that from the James Clear book? Is that where that's coming from?
I haven't read it. So there's someone that I follow that talks about it a lot. And I think that's where she got it from. But I really want to read that.
Yeah.
Because I'm on habit number 1. I haven't stacked my habits yet. But the habit that I'm actually really finding helping me is before I do anything in the morning, I wake up, I beeline straight to the kitchen. I have a glass of water, and then I drink Athletic Greens. I'm not sure if you have that.
We don't have Athletic Greens, but I'm very, very familiar with Athletic Greens, and we may or may not have had Athletic Greens around the house at some point.
Okay. Yeah. So this is not an ad for Athletic Greens, but the
changed
wonders
your life.
It did. It really did. I think the energy that I get from it in the morning, I'm so much clearer. I'm so much more focused. I'm like, I also feel great because I got my greens first thing in the morning. So, I feel like you make healthier decisions throughout your day if you get that started.
Oh, yeah.
And so, that's habit number 1. And I have found that every morning, like I wake up, I look forward to it. I have my water, my greens, and then I drink my coffee, and I feel less jittery. I feel less anxious. Again, I don't know what the science behind Athletic Greens is in terms of how it makes you feel, cognitively or with mental health. But, obviously nutrition is medicine too. So that has been really, really helpful for my kind of retrieving back from caffeine.
Yes.
Because there used to be days where I would drink 2 Celsius a day, which is horrible.
Well, I can't even judge that because I would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
But what I'm learning is that actually it's this, so this is what I've discovered, right? And I'm not an expert on this either. But by the way, I think that people, I think that is like for a lot of people a new idea that like food is medicine and can do so much for you in and of itself. Like, I think that can be a new idea for a lot of people. So I think that that's really important. But yeah, I think you can get caught in this cycle where this is what was happening to me. So I would wake up tired. So I'd be like, oh, I have to have 2, 3, 4 cups of coffee to get through this day. But what happens is it snowballs in the other direction. Again, I don't know the science. I just know how I felt. And I would be so much more sluggish the next day. So then I would be like, oh, well, I have to drink that again to get through. Like I have to get through this week. And it would just snowball in that direction. And you can, again, this is my experience, but I've been able to reset my energy levels just by like scaling it back. Not even completely cutting it out, but just scaling it back. It's like my body, like, I don't know if it was like my adrenals were just like overtaxed or what, but yeah, I noticed a difference.
Absolutely. And I'm such a big believer in being intuitive with your body in any way, shape, or form, especially when it comes to eating. But I think too, even with energy, is listening to your body. There are certain things that work. There are certain things that don't. I would drink Celsius like a mad person, and I would be like vibrating, and I already have anxiety, and it would increase my anxiety tenfold. And I have performance anxiety before I teach certain specific class styles. Because of that OCD component, which I know we're going to get into, but it's kind of the perfectionism of if there's one flaw, everyone's going to hate me. They're going to write horrible reviews and I'm never going to teach a class again. So I'd be like, I need this Celsius to give me all this energy. That way I'm like an Energizer bunny running around and everybody's going to have a great time. And then I would realize, oh, this is making me perform worse because of the increased anxiety. And again, that's just me. I'll still drink a Celsius here and there. I'm not bashing that by any means, but I know for me, it was more so being intuitive of like, okay, do I need this energy Or do I just want it? Is it kind of something that plays into, oh, well, I like walking in with an energy drink in my hand. I like the little boost it gives me,
100%. I was just talking with Kate about this last night and I wrote down perfectionism. Also, I hit record like
that's
5 minutes ago. I was like, this conversation's flowing organically.
Yeah.
So we're just going to roll with it.
I love it.
I told Kate this last night. I think my body became, my brain became addicted to this like certain way of feeling. Like it almost didn't know how to operate if it wasn't super jittery and tensed up and sort of that like anxious energy. And again, I'm not an expert. I've been on this journey since August because I would always watch all these YouTube videos and do reading, and it's like, oh, if you have anxiety, like you can drink coffee, like it's fine. The science, I feel like there were some people trying to justify the science that it doesn't actually give you energy. It just blocks the feeling of being tired.
Yeah.
But I was like, I think it's adenosine. Adenosine is the chemical that builds up in your brain that makes you feel tired, and and caffeine binds to those receptors and blocks it. That's my high level understanding.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert.
Sounds pretty high level to me.
Yeah. But I was like, that's not matching up with my reality. Like when I drink coffee, I feel more tense. So it's been a sad breakup for me. I really do love it. And
even the smell, the smell just does it like releases serotonin for me. I'm like, that is joy in smell form.
That is a joy, and that is joy in a cup right there.
Literally.
Yeah, there's a whole ritual around it. Yeah, there's a whole ritual for me, and it's just my little time in the morning. But what are you gonna do?
Exactly. Well, and I think too that is really what's interesting, and I think what overwhelms a lot of people is because of the internet and because of social media. There are so many opinions and articles and factual things about so many different things that people get so confused on, well, I thought this was good for me and now it's terrible. I thought this would work for me and now it doesn't. And so for me, one thing that I like to follow for myself is everybody and every body is different. And so what works for
I like that.
You may not work for me. What works for me may not work for you. Our bodies are completely different. They completely respond differently to certain things, whether it be food, whether it be the drinks we consume, whether it be physical activity. There are certain things that people can do that work really well for others that don't necessarily work for you. And that's okay. That's why I think it's really important. Your body's going to tell you what it wants. It's going to tell you what it needs. And I think it's just the ability of being able to tap into that and intuitively listen to it and be able to kind of follow what it needs from you. And that's really been helping me a lot too. And again, that's kind of why I'm starting, and again, only on step 1 of habit stacking, but finding little things that are kind of non-negotiables for me in a good way. Things that I don't look at like, oh my God, it's such a hassle. I have to drink my greens this morning. Oh, I can't believe it. Like I look forward to it. Yeah. I know the way it makes me feel. I like that feeling. I like the way it sets me up for the day. So that's habit number 1. Eventually over time, I'm going to see what's another thing that's something I look forward to. That's not going to be a stressor. It's not going to take time out of my day that I'm going to dread and I'm going to push it off on my calendar. It's something I look forward to. And it's those little things that you do for you specifically that really work. That individual that I was following that's kind of talking about that habit stacking, I really admire her because she does 10 before 10, which is 10 minutes of walking outside before 10 a.m. every day. I love the concept. I can't do it. I wish I could. But for me, 10 minutes is like one time around the block. And then, I feel obligated to take my dogs with me and they can't only walk for 10 minutes. And so I like the concept. So for me, I like that she's getting outside. Obviously, we need vitamin D to survive. Vitamin D deficiency is a very big thing, especially during this time of year. So I think for me, I like the concept of 10 before 10. Anyone has 10 minutes. We spend 10 minutes on our phones at any given point, pretty much every hour. So I think I'm going to turn that into just 10 minutes outside before 10 a.m. Whether I can take my laptop outside and do some work or take some calls or sit and drink my coffee and watch my dogs hang out. but kind of creating those habits that I know make me feel really good and then transitioning as to what necessarily works for me.
Definitely. And I think a key to habit stacking, and I say this a lot with my coaching clients, and I do it with myself, is like, make it so simple you can't fail.
Exactly.
Like your greens drink is already pre-made.
Yeah. I don't have to do anything.
you just mix it up, right?
Yeah, or with just water. It's one scoop. The scooper's already in there. I don't have to go clean it or wash it out. It is the easiest thing to do.
Exactly. And so the like probability that you do it is so much higher, because it would be so different if you had to wake up and juice some celery and kale and carrots and turmeric and ginger and whatever else is in there, and like you just probably wouldn't stick with it. And so I think that that's one of the keys with habit stacking too, is like, make it so simple you can't fail. Like if going on a walk for an hour feels like too much in the morning, 10 before 10 seems like a great substitute.
It's a great place to start.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I really like that. And I like what you said too about, make it so simple you can't fail. Because I think with anything, even with physical fitness, I hear this a lot where people come to me, because I teach fitness. People will come to me and be like, oh, I just don't have the time. And it's like, well, I think it just depends on what you're looking into. There are so many different forms of movement that you can do that doesn't have to be an hour in the gym lifting super heavy weights surrounded by people. If that's not your jam, if you're more of I just want to walk outside and you've got time to do that, you work from home and you can go on a quick lunch break walk, do that, Again, everybody is different. So it just really depends on what works for you in that circumstance. And I think that that's a really, really good way to put it.
Yeah, I will say, and this is just a me thing, I really don't like when people say they don't have the time. I think, and I get it, but I would prefer that people say they don't have the interest.
Yes.
Or they don't have the desire to figure out.
Or the motivation.
Because I think that that's like, if you really unpack it, that's the truth.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I don't want to shame anybody for saying that, but I really try to take that out of my vocabulary, because if I don't have the time for something, I want to evaluate my schedule to understand like why, like if that's really the case, why?
Yeah.
And if it's going to be this huge time commitment, do I really even want to do that? Like that's the only option. More than likely, every time I discover, it's like, oh, I really just don't want to do this. And
it's true.
I'm trying to find an excuse to get out of it.
I read one time, every time you want to say, oh, I'm too busy, instead say it's not a priority for me. And then see how that feels. And it really got me to my core, because it was a season of my life where I was saying that to everyone. If they wanted to hang out, if they wanted to do this, oh, I'm too busy.
Yep.
And then I realized it. And I'm like, if I'm really going to tell someone hanging out with you is not a priority to me, that didn't sit right with me. And it wasn't true. I loved that person. I want to spend time with them. But I had convinced myself that I didn't have time to be able to do that. And that's okay. I think what we're seeing a lot is setting boundaries, which I think is incredibly important. And I think it is going hand in that, where, realizing what is a priority to you, realizing where you should set boundaries, not necessarily with people, but with yourself, the things that you can really handle. There are people that I know that I am so inspired by, where they'll wake up super early, get a workout in, work all day, and then they have time for a social life at the end of their day, and then they can do it again first thing the next morning, 7 days a week, 24/7.
Yeah.
I can't. I get socially exhausted very easily, which I know a lot of people wouldn't believe about me, because I am very social.
Yeah, I do too.
I have social anxiety. For me, the workup of going out and doing things with people, sometimes it feels like I ran a marathon. So sometimes I need a day or two to just decompress. And I think it's really important that we allow people to express that. I had someone ask me to hang out the other day. I wasn't doing anything really. I ran some errands and was hanging out at home, but I was at home the whole previous week for Thanksgiving. I had driven 6 hours back the day before, taught that morning, and I was like, you know what? I need to take some time for me today. And that felt really good for me. And that person respected that, because they know who I am at my core. And I think that is such a balance that we need in life.
I'm pulling up a text right now, because one of my buddies was like, I just had gotten back from 10 days in New York with Kate. Kate's from New York, and it was everything that you said. Every night was something, and I was just depleted.
Yeah.
When I got back, because then it's a 6-hour flight home. And one of my buddies was like, want to watch the game tonight? And I was just like, not tonight, man. Like 10 days in New York City and a 6-hour flight has me exhausted. But what are you doing? And I inserted like far enough out into the future to show the person like, I like you. I want to hang out with you. Yeah. I value our friendship, but right now is just not what's going to work for me. And I had gotten a text from a family member asking for me to do something, and I just didn't respond for 2 days. And on the third day I woke up and said, hey, I felt really burnt out from like holiday travel, but I've got the energy today to address this. Like, what do you need from me?
Yes.
So like, I think it's okay to set boundaries, but I wouldn't have been there. I don't think I would have been there a few years ago. Like I'm really learning about what it means to set boundaries and protect your energy. And I think that this might be the perfect time to sort of jump into the anxiety side of things. Yes. So we didn't do even a formal introduction. We were just rolling. I hit record. Right, I'll do more of a formal intro and outro after the podcast. But can you tell my audience a little bit more about your experience of living with anxiety, sort of where and when it started?
Yeah. So I was actually thinking about that because I knew we were going to touch on anxiety. And so I was thinking about how to explain it in a way that hopefully makes sense, because it started when I was like 5 years old. And I think when we're kids, we have such an active imagination. And again, you're so young, you don't really understand what's going on. And so the way that I explain this, and I hope that there's an expert out there that maybe hears this and can explain to me why it was such a strange revelation. But I vividly remember when I was a kid and I would go to sleep and I would close my eyes, and it felt like I was in a room that kept getting bigger and I was shrinking. It was really interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
And I couldn't escape this room, you know, and again, I'm a child, very active imagination, but it brings on a sense of panic where I'm like, oh my God, I am slowly disappearing. And there's this room that's never ending. And I remember that was kind of my first experience with panic attacks as like a 5-year-old. And I didn't know what panic was. You know, I'm like out on a playground playing with my friends. I don't know what that means, but every night I would go to sleep and I would have the same overwhelming feeling, the tightening in the chest, the panic, the sweaty palms, the hyperventilating, and not really understanding why. And then there would be certain times too, where during the day, it would be this overwhelming feeling of, you know, like if someone's yelling at you, you know, that instinct of like, you want to kind of curl up in a ball and die. So it would be like that. It would feel like people were screaming at me, even though there was nothing. There was no noise. There was nothing going on. But it was my body's response of wanting to like shrivel up and escape from whatever that feeling was. And again, this is really the only time I've ever tried to articulate this so I can understand if someone's listening to this, they're like, this person has no idea what they're talking about, but it's my experience.
It's your experience.
It
so,
is. Yeah.
So they can screw off.
Exactly.
So keep going. Yeah. So tell me, because I'm curious. I want to hear more about this.
Yeah. So that was pretty much the two circumstances that would happen to me pretty consistently. And then that's kind of when the ADHD and OCD came in. So with my ADHD, my parents took me to what they call the sit still doctor, because I think I was 7 when I went for that. And I was a rambunctious kid. You know, when I talked to my therapist about it now, she was like, the way that therapists treat ADHD is so different than how I would. And the way that she was explaining it to me was a really interesting way. You know, she's like, we have kids that have all this energy, which is not a bad thing to have. Right. And then we try to sit them down and make them stop. And, you know, I learned how to play Uno. That was like how my sit still doctor got me to relax, come down, not be so hyperactive. And, you know, my current therapist was saying, kids run around. It's like if you have a dog that's got high energy, you take it for a walk. You don't put it in its crate.
Yeah.
You know, and it's
Yeah.
more so. And I was like, oh my God, it's so true. And it's more so of just finding a way to channel that energy, which I
Yes.
think for me is where physical fitness comes in, which I know we'll dive into a little bit later. But that was where I found a way to release that ADHD, kind of like the hyperactive part to it.
Yeah. And you're talking, was it Uno that you found a way to release it, or it
no,
was
so
the
that was what my
channeling
doctor told me to do.
Okay.
My doctor was like, here's our fix. And it's funny because my current therapist is like, yeah, we teach Uno to all these kids. And she was like, I don't really know why, but it's, you know, how they say it. I think it's the focus on one thing at a time. Because for me, even still as an adult, my mind is in 3 different places at one time.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask that. What does it feel like to live with ADHD? Like, put me inside of your mind and in your body.
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways that it surfaces. So if I'm in a long conversation with someone, let's say, for example, I really have to be very attentive to be listening to what that person is saying, because I could be distracted by something behind you. I could be distracted by a noise. That's why I asked for these headphones, because I'm like, even my dog sitting next to me chewing on his toy right now can like just make me think of a million different things. I can be like, oh, I need to go buy him a new toy at the store. I completely forgot to do that. Or, oh, I need to go buy him food. We just ran out. And so it's weird things where I'll see something, hear something, and then it'll trigger me to think of something completely unrelated that I need to do later.
Yes.
And then another way too that really bothers me, which is why I have 2 different forms of a calendar. I have a schedule planner that I write out, and then I have a calendar in my laptop, because I will be making a piece of toast. My toast will be in the toaster, and then I'll be like, oh my God, I need to start a load of laundry. And then I'll go get the laundry. I'll take it to the laundry machine. Okay, I need to go get soap. Oh, I need to actually make my bed right now. Oh, and while I'm doing that, I forgot I need to send this email. So I'm sending this email. And then I'm like, I didn't make my bed. I didn't get the soap for my laundry. My laundry's sitting outside and there's toast burning in the toaster. Like,
okay. Yes. That's so helpful. I do a variation of that myself, because I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was in high school.
Okay. Yeah.
So because I feel like I focus so much on the OCD and talking about that, I don't talk much about the ADHD, because for me, it doesn't hinder my life, but I do things like that.
Yes.
Like, I literally, hearing that out loud, I'm like, that's how my brain operates. And Kate will be like, are you listening to me right now?
Yes.
Because she'll say something and she gets upset, and I get it, but she'll say something that it just, the way that it works in my brain is it literally takes me down a separate path.
A completely different place.
And I have to bring myself back to the conversation. And it's nothing personal. Yeah, it's nothing personal. It takes so much work.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So you're like, things can just grab your attention quickly.
Oh, so quickly.
Yeah.
So quickly. And it does impact my life in a certain way where I felt like for a very long time, I could not get things done.
Okay.
You know, and even with my schedule planner, that helped quite a bit. I would write it out. I have to cross it off. Even if it's something like walk the dogs that, you know, you're going to do every day, I have to physically write it down every single day. Yeah. The satisfaction of crossing it off the list, knowing I had a task, I completed it for the day. But then it's still, I was finding it resurfacing. So now what I'm trying to use is Google Calendar of setting times.
Yeah.
Specific times to do things. And I think that that's a difficult thing for me to navigate, because I never like to be the kind of person where, oh, it's this time I have to do this specific task. Life happens, things get shifted around. So it's not like right at 9 o'clock, I need to do something because my calendar says so, even if I'm not finished with something else. Yeah. It's more so having the reminder of, okay, this is a task that I need to do. I'm going to shave off an hour to do it. And that kind of goes into the OCD piece, which I'm sure you can relate to as well, is when I give myself a time instead of giving myself a task. So right now I'm getting my nutrition certification. If I tell myself study nutrition certification program from 9 to 10 a.m., I'll stop at 10 a.m. I gave myself an hour. It's good work. I'll come back and do it again later if I've got time, or I'll do it the next day. But if I say finish chapter 20, I don't know how long that's going to take. And with my OCD, I have to finish it. When I start something, I have to finish it. I can't walk away until that task is completed. I get the physical anxiety, almost the panic of, oh my God, I set this task. I cannot do anything else until I finish.
Yes.
Which then sets off the course for the rest of what you were planning to do that day. Because let's say chapter 20 takes me 3 hours. Well, I should have walked the dogs. I should have done the laundry. I should have done my work calls, whatever it may be. But because I'm so hyper focused on that one thing, I can't focus on anything else. I have to complete it. So I found I use timing on my side instead of specific tasks. And I feel less discouraged, because if I spent 3 hours on chapter 20, I don't want to go back and do it again the next day. But if I'm giving myself 30 minutes or an hour every single day, that seems much more manageable. It's less anxiety on my piece to get it done. And then I can always make sure that I'm functioning at like the highest capacity I can.
That's really interesting, because Kate and I were literally talking about that last night. Like, I'm not even kidding you. Because that is how I've learned I need to operate. I just have to set a time limit for something, like even just preparation for this podcast. Like, I block off an hour, and inside of that hour, I'm like, I will write down and think about as many questions as possible. And when the hours, if I'm done before, great. But at the hour, it doesn't matter where I'm at with the questions. I'm just, I'm done. And I have to do that with everything, because it was tormenting me. It was like, and I was feeling worse about myself. And I'm like, this is stupid. You put in time today. It's like, true. It doesn't matter.
Yes.
And I was trying to play this battle with myself. And I eventually just got to a place where the timing, it does help. It really does.
Tremendously.
Yeah.
And that's so funny that you had that realization, because I think mine was just about a week ago. It's not something that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
But I think as we grow and evolve with OCD and the perfectionism piece and, wanting everything to be so structured, life doesn't work that way, And so if you work with time on your side instead of against you, it'll make these things significantly easier to navigate and less stress and anxiety on our plates moving forward.
Yeah. So when were you diagnosed with OCD? Did that happen around the time of ADHD or?
So I've never actually received an official, this is what you have. It's more so been talked about in therapy. Okay. And so it wasn't like I needed to go to a specialist and, oh, this is what you have. And I think that there are people that deal with it on a much more severe circumstance than I do, but it was addressed with the ADHD piece when I was a kid. So when I realized that I had it, and I'm working with my therapist now to get an official diagnosis, just because I hate being that person that walks around like, oh, I have these things, but no, I don't have it written down on paper, but I know in my being, when I speak with people, professionals about it, they're like, oh yeah, that's what it is. So it started for me probably about at the age of 7, where I had tics really badly.
Yeah.
And the perfectionism piece, it was so crazy, because OCD and anxiety are just one and the same. They are twin flames, like you almost can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
And so my OCD would then spark my anxiety. So my parents, if I put socks on, the lining of the socks could not touch my toes. It just couldn't. I hated it. And I would scream and I would cry and I would go into a full-blown panic attack, which as a parent looks like a temper tantrum. So they'd be like, live with it. You're fine. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't even stand up to walk because of the way it made me feel was so horrible. This lining of the seam on my toes. Same thing with like, if my sister were cooking me mac and cheese, if there was like one black speck, perhaps from the pot, or like a piece of pepper that got in it, I couldn't eat the entire bowl. It was contaminated for me. It needed to be perfect. Everything needed to match. With my hair, I had dance recitals all the time. If there was one hair out of place or one bump, I'd have to do it again because I would panic. And then is when it transitioned into tics. So let's say I'm walking by a surface and I touch a countertop one time. I would have to go back and do it again. But I'd have to make sure that it felt the exact same the second time around.
They call this just right OCD.
Great.
That's what that's called, just right OCD.
Okay,
where everything you do, like the tics or whatever, have to feel just right.
They have to feel perfect. And if not, I have to do it again.
Yes.
And everything for me has to be in a combination of 2. 2 is my special number.
Okay.
And so I still into my adulthood sometimes do this weird thing with my eyebrows.
Yeah.
Like that's like a tick for me.
What do you do?
It's like I squeeze my eyes closed and then do that. Like it's like I furrow my eyebrows together and then they come up.
Yeah.
And I just do it throughout the day. And it's funny because people that have known me for a long time, my boyfriend who lives with me never really notices.
Yeah.
But I notice if I'm doing it for a long period of time because like then I get like a tension headache in my forehead.
From just doing it so many times throughout the day.
Yeah. Yes. And that's like a physical one on my body that I have. The counts of tooth thing lasted for a couple years for me where I had to do everything perfectly twice.
Yeah.
But what I've noticed for me, and I was just thinking about it this morning and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. It's carried into my adulthood because I'm obsessed with even numbers. Like if I'm changing the volume on the TV, it cannot be to an odd number. Like it can't be volume 37. It has to be 38.
Yeah.
And like all of the major things in my life that had happened to me are in even numbered years. I was born on an even number year. Every year I've graduated has been on an even number year. I want to continue that trend. Like I don't want anything to happen on odd number years. It's very interesting.
Do you now with the just right? Because my OCD is more on the intrusive thought side of the house where I have these intrusive thoughts that feel very real and I feel like they're going to come true if I don't do some sort of compulsion.
Yeah.
Do you like with the just right? Is it that you don't like the feeling of it, or is it that I'm sure it's part of it, but do you have this fear that if you don't touch the surface perfectly twice, that something bad will happen?
I think so. Because when you say that also kind of, and again, I really do need to look more into it because I think that it'll explain a lot as to why I do certain things. So for me, if let's say my boyfriend's leaving the house, I have to give him a hug, a kiss, tell him I love him because I'm afraid if I don't, he might get into a car accident. I'll never see him again.
Yes. You know? So you that is something that you have to do every time before he leaves.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So
in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't have to sound the same, feel the same, but there has to be that component because I'm terrified that if something happens, I didn't do that one thing and it's my fault.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think that this is really, really helpful for listeners because I'm not a therapist, but my understanding of OCD tells me that all the components are lined up there.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. And
all
that's why I never like to say self-diagnose because I think a lot of people do that. But from people that I've spoken with that have been diagnosed or are being treated for it, I have everything that's there. And even my therapist has been like, yeah, that's pretty much what that is.
So what are you doing with your therapist to work on that? I'm curious. Like how have you, because I know what I did, but I'm curious what you do in therapy.
Yeah. So I started therapy again. So I was in therapy about 5 years ago for about 2 years. And then I got out of it because I was, a broke person after college and couldn't afford it. And insurance just really didn't help me out that much.
Yeah.
So with my current therapist, we've only been with each other for about 2 or 3 months. So we've been working more so on the anxiety piece.
Yeah.
Versus the OCD. So I don't really have an answer for you there just because we haven't gotten to that point yet, but I am curious as to how yours helps you because maybe I can use that.
Well, what I'll tell you is that you should look into exposure and response prevention, ERP, and doing that specifically with a therapist that specializes in the treatment of OCD. That's what I did. And that's sort of right now the golden standard for like treating the obsessions and the compulsions. Because there are a lot of other talk therapies out there that are really helpful for like the anxiety.
Yeah.
But some of them can actually be, I don't want to say detrimental, but like, if somebody tells you not to think about a pink elephant, you're going to think about it. You're going to think about a pink elephant. If somebody's like, oh, it's fine. You don't need to kiss and hug your boyfriend and tell him goodbye before he leaves.
Yep.
Just don't think about it. You're going to think about it. And so exposure and response prevention basically forces you to confront these fears, right? Because you just talked about how the touching and needing to get everything just right because of some impending doom, it basically forces you to confront those and then sit with them without compulsing. So without doing the ritual to like get things just right.
Okay.
And it feels really uncomfortable at first.
I was to say the thought of it's making my heart rate go up right now.
Yes, and that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
So that's a sign that tells me that this would be really helpful for you, because basically what it does is it teaches your brain to habituate to the fear of this bad thing happening, and it starts to teach your brain, oh, if I don't touch this surface twice and like I just sit in this discomfort, maybe something bad will happen, maybe it won't. That's out of my control. There's nothing that I can do about it. And the only way I can say is it just, you habituate, like your brain stops to like look at it as like a source of fear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that piece right there of I can't control it.
Yeah.
You know, that's the hardest part for me. And I'm sure you can relate as well. Having that is the being out of control. There are so many things I won't do in life because I can't be in control of them, you know? And so it's coming to terms with the fact that you're never going to be able to control pretty much anything in your life, and that being okay.
Yeah.
You know, and I listened to this podcast once with this anxiety specialist, and she was saying how we can use anxiety to shift it to work in our favor and to look at it as a good thing. And, you know, if you have anxiety, it means you care about something a lot, you know, care about it maybe more so than anyone else, this specific thing, whatever it may be.
Right.
And turning that into a passionate drive you have for this one thing, which is a great thing. It means you want to be successful at what you're doing, or it means you want to finish this book, or it means you want to do X, Y, and Z. You want to make your house look really clean. You know, it's more so being like, I care about this thing so much. I'm obsessed with it. I want it to be great, but if it doesn't turn out that way, that's okay. I'm willing to accept that, because I am a human that is born with flaws, and I'm never going to do everything perfectly, but I'm going to try my damn best, and it's going to feel really good, you know? And that was a way that really helped me, because a lot of my anxiety was with teaching, with fitness. And I kind of found fitness 4 years ago or so. No, a little bit longer than that. It was around the time when I got diagnosed with my thyroid disease, which I know you want to talk about as well. And fitness was something that I realized I eventually wanted to teach. I went to a cycle class and it was addicting. I was like, this is so cool. I feel like I'm in a club, but I'm working out simultaneously. Like, what a concept. Working out can be fun. Yeah. And so immediately, it's kind of the Leo in me. I was like, I want to be up there. I want to be like center stage. I want to teach these people. I want to be for this class what that instructor was for me. I wanted to have that impact, because I knew that it was kind of what my calling was. But then when I got to finally be able to teach, I'll never forget, I was driving with my boyfriend to teach probably my first class. And it was the first class he was ever going to attend. Days leading up to it, I thought I was going to throw up every second. I was terrified. Yeah. And, you know, he just said, hey, you know, it's okay if this doesn't end up being what you thought it would be. You know, it's okay. That doesn't mean you're a failure. You tried, you did it. Yeah. You know, and whatever it ends up being to you, that's okay. But if it's this constant anxiety and it's causing you stress days in advance, you know, just weigh your options. Is it worth that? Are you doing it because you want to be known as something, or are you doing it because it's what's true to you? And that was like a really good way for me to think about it. Was, did I want to be an instructor just because it was the cool thing to do? And then I eventually realized, absolutely not. It is my calling. It is what I am born to do. I know that. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that the anxiety doesn't come. You know, like, I'm sure a lot of people that take my classes, and even people that I share with about this, they really don't believe it, because I'm a different persona when I'm teaching. But right before I open the doors, I'm like, pep talks. I'm in there an hour early running through my playlist. I run through my playlist 10 times at home before I even consider it's good. You know, it has to have every single component. And that's what I was talking to my therapist about. And I was like, I just have this anxiety and perfectionism with my classes that I need to hit. Like I need it. And she was like, take it from the viewpoint of being the person walking into the room, being the person who's maybe never been in a workout class before. This is their first time. They're surrounded by people who may have done this 100 times, so they feel intimidated. Let's say you crack a joke, you mess up on a countdown, and you're like, oh shit, my bad. That person's going to become instantly more comfortable because you're showing your humanness. And she was like, take it for what it is. Be yourself, be willing to make mistakes, because at the end of the day, that's going to make people want to be around you more. And I really took that to heart, because I know for me, when I take an instructor who's laughing, cracking jokes, maybe said something weird and they were like, I don't know what I was just saying just now or whatever, calling themselves out kind of,
Yeah.
I gravitate towards that kind of person so much more because of the human aspect of it. And I've really been trying to focus on being human lately and recognizing that there's not a single human on this earth that's perfect, that's going to do everything perfectly. It's physically impossible. And so once I started really celebrating my humanness, my flaws, my imperfections, the things that I may not do great or the things that I may, it really has helped with my anxiety, because it's taking down that perfectionism piece.
It's the weight. Like, as you were talking about that, it's like, first off, I resonate with that so much, because when so I'm a public speaker, and when I first started public speaking, 3-4 nights before the speech, I would be tossing and turning in bed, heart pounding, exhausted. By the time I was actually there to give the speech, I was like, I just want to get this freaking over with.
Yes.
I just want this done so that I can relax. This is exhausting. And I realized something similar, where there was such this high standard I had put on myself for needing to get everything completely perfect and needing to be this certain type of person and be this certain way. And I realized, like, I'm like, a lot of this is like ego driven too.
Yeah.
And it's not it wasn't like I was like intentionally doing it, but what you're talking about is just loosening the grip. And like, there's such a weight lifted in that, I feel like. And one thing that I started doing before my speeches was sort of what your therapist was talking about, where it's like, sort of, this is a little bit deep, but like realizing the oneness in all of us. Like, we're all just on this random rock spinning in the middle of space. Like, we're just like having this human experience. And to her point, and what you were saying is like, somebody coming in and hearing my speech or coming into your class for the first time, they have their own fears and their own anxieties, and or they don't, right? They walk in there and they think they're the shit, and they're awesome and they're great, and that's their energy and their vibe too. But I can't appeal to all these different vibes. I just want to show up as the best version of myself and be inviting and try to impact the people who find my message valuable. And if you came into the workout class and you didn't vibe with what I was bringing, that's fine. You can go to a different workout.
That's okay. And it's so funny that you say that, because that was one of the reasons that I had kind of brought up that piece, because I just want everyone to like me. I'm such a people pleaser.
I'm the same way.
And you speaking publicly, there's so much pressure on that. Me teaching classes, I want people to love me. I want people to come to my classes. And she was like, look at it as an 80-20 rule. She said 80% of the people in life are going to love you because they know you, they know what you stand for, they know who you are, they respect you, they care about you deeply. That 80% is awesome. 20% of people out there, no matter what you say, they're going to have a problem with it and you have absolutely no control over it. That's okay. It's being confident in knowing who you are and knowing what you bring to the table and not allowing that insecurity to control you, because there's nothing that you can say or do to make that 20% of those people feel any differently about you. So just really love on those 80%, love on yourself, know that you're going to stay true to who you are and what you bring to the table. And that's more than enough.
It is. And it's funny because I sort of landed on that concept as well, where it was like, I'm going to set a standard for how I treat all people.
Exactly.
Regardless of the energy that they show me. And then outside of that, I'm not going to concern myself with whether somebody likes me or not. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that I made that decision and then that was the end of my people pleasing. It's a everyday journey for me. I want to make my natural default is, and I don't know, I probably need to examine this more, is I want to make other people feel good.
Yep.
But I also am getting to a place where I recognize it's not my responsibility to make you feel good. Like you as your own person, you're also responsible for showing up and doing the things that you need to do to get the most out of your life. I don't want to be the person to drag you down. And that's why I'm always going to try to show up and be positive to the best of my ability. But I can't go around the planet trying to make everybody happy and lift everybody's mood all the time. I like that 80-20 rule. And that was another thing I landed on with the speeches. It was I was just like, there are going to be some people who show up and this just isn't their jam. Like,
and that's okay.
Yeah. And that's fine because I can't change that anyways.
Exactly.
Like I literally can't change their feelings towards it in this moment. Maybe something that I say today, 2 years from now, they wake up and go, wow, that thing that he said, actually, now I'm at a maturity level in my life where this resonates. But I can't control people's maturity levels, their personalities, what they went through that day. Like none of that.
It's all so circumstantial. Like you said, it could have been something that they went through that day. We don't know. The thing that I really try to live by is you never regret showing someone kindness, regardless of how they reciprocate to you. You know, you could be really nice to someone and they can treat you like crap, or they can go say something behind your back. That's okay. It may be selfish, but I feel good that I treated that person with kindness. I can move forward with my day, you know? And I think that that's kind of like what you were just saying too, is I'm going to give my true self. And that's what's important to me, is being kind to everyone, just because we don't know what people are going through. That may not resonate for everyone, and that's a-okay. But for me, I know that showing people kindness is just what brings me joy. And it's something that I feel good about doing because I don't walk in everyone's shoes. I only walk in my own. And I never want to be a person to add to someone's burden. I never want to be a person to add to someone's negative experience for a day. But also coming to accept the fact that even if I showed kindness to a person, they may say something about me behind my back, and that's okay. You know, again, it didn't happen overnight. It's something that's a conscious effort that we have to work through, but it feels a lot better being like, I'm a human. You know, these are my flaws. They're on display 24/7. I can't hide them, but I'm trying my best, you know, and that feels like more than enough. And I wanted to touch too on how you had said that you couldn't wait for these speeches to get over with.
Yeah.
And that's how I would really feel with classes. I would just be like, oh my God, I cannot wait for this to be over. And then people would come up to me and they'd be like, oh my God, that was so fun, or so this. And I'm like, oh, I don't remember it. I blacked out, you know? And that was for probably the first year of teaching for me. Like I was so focused on presenting everything so perfectly that I was never consciously enjoying the moment. And so one thing that's really helped me, because one thing I really went to therapy for, was I have such an issue being present.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's the ADHD piece of my mind is always going a million miles an hour in different directions. But being present in classes and realizing, hey, you're doing what you always wanted to do. You're lucky that you get to do it at a young age. You know, you found your passion, something that lights your soul on fire that doesn't feel like a job. You know, I was like, why can't I be present in that moment? And it was because I was trying so hard to say the right things, do the right things, cue the right things, hoping that my music was something that they jive to. And if not, then I'm the worst instructor on earth. And when I threw all of that, not necessarily out the window, it's kind of, you know, right in my back seat, but
but you're putting some distance between you.
I'm putting distance. It'll reappear some days too. That's okay. But trying my best to distance myself from it as much as I can has really helped me to be present in those moments.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I think that's this, what would you call this mindset? Like, what would you call this mentality? Because I think it's important for people. This is obviously one of the tools in your tool belt for coping with perfectionism. So what would you call it?
The mindset of like the humanness piece of trying to be okay. Yeah.
Just being okay. Essentially just being okay and accepting.
I would say like a humanness mindset almost. You know, I'm really obsessed with being a human lately. And it's been really nice. Like I have really been able to start letting go of things that I physically have no control over.
Yeah.
You know, tumultuous relationships with family, for example, trying to control certain relationships in my life that have nothing to do with me. Being so obsessed with wanting that person to see what I see, wanting to help them, wanting to save them from something. And then realizing, taking a step back, that's not my relationship. What I do have control over is my relationship with this specific person. So I'm going to do my best to try to control that relationship and to try to foster it, to help it grow, to nourish it, to be a positive experience, but to let go of the things that I have no control over and realizing that that is accepting my humanness, that I'm not some all being God or universe, whatever you believe in, to have control over these things. That's not my place. That's not why I'm here on this earth. And really accepting the humanness of myself lately has been very freeing.
This seems to be a theme in a lot of my podcasts, because the word that I would put behind that is detachment. You're detaching from this need to be perfect and to control the outcome of so many different situations, whether that be teaching. Just muted my mic. I just wanted to get the volume right on here. Whether it be the outcome in one of your classes or with a relationship with somebody. And I think that starts by building awareness around what you can and cannot control. Focusing inwards on, okay, well, these are the standards. This is how I can show up. I've got an hour to prepare for this class. That's it. Once the hour's up, like all I can do is show up and do my best, and that's it. Or sort of standards like that, kind of using that as a tangible example.
Absolutely.
But then also the mindset of like, I'm a human, and inherently as a human, I'm flawed and I'm imperfect. And as a result of that, you detach from this need for constant control over everything.
Exactly. And, you know, if there's anyone listening that's contemplating going to therapy, I cannot recommend it enough. And I'm sure you talk about it a lot, but it really will change your life. You know, like I had gone to therapy for years before this.
How has it changed your life? And I'm pulling up a post on Instagram. I'm trying not to be rude, but you said something earlier, and I want to pull this post up because you said something that I thought was really important, which was talking about feeling the gratitude and blessing for what you were doing in your life now. That it was like you had prayed for these days, right? And you were almost stealing the joy away from yourself.
I was. Absolutely.
And I was doing the same thing. So it's an evolution of learning how to tap into the present and be in your body and be there in the moment when you're doing something. And I remember seeing this post. This was back in 2021 from a friend of mine from high school. He said, it's important to realize that you are living inside of one of your answered prayers while you wait for your next one. There's always a place for gratitude. And I feel like I had dreamed of being a public speaker for years. And then I was a full-time speaker, but I was stealing the joy because of my own perspective on how things had to go. And once I changed that, the joy of the process came back. And that is something I'm always monitoring because I feel that my brain's natural tendency is to go to that side. where I need the control. I'm super anxious about it. I need things to go exactly right. I need to know that people like me, that they resonated with my message. And when I get down that rabbit hole, I can always feel it. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah, it's a physical feeling.
It is. And my barometer for that is, and I actually picked this up from somebody else, is like when I feel peace towards something, I'm like, okay, what are the mindsets and what have I done today and what have I been thinking that has helped bring this feeling of peace? I want to try to infuse more of that. Or what have I let go of?
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to cut you off because I am curious, what did you get from therapy? But I just, you made such a good point that sometimes we can be in the right thing for us, but it's the way that we think about it that is stealing the joy. And it is the right thing.
Yeah. And, you know, touching on that really quickly too, think about how many celebrities that we have seen pass away from taking their own lives when people on the outside are like, oh my God, they have everything. They've got money, they've got fame, they've got family. What more do you need? You know? And that's a perfect representation where you can seem like you have everything. Maybe that's what that person's goal was. And then when they got there, they couldn't be present for it, or it was too much. And so it's really finding the balance of that as well that I think is incredibly important. And gratitude is such a slippery slope too, because, you know, I believe that you and I are not sitting here saying that people should just go through their days being grateful for everything that happens to them. You know, that's not the case.
Yeah.
I think gratitude is finding, I read this thing the other day that's called glimmers, where it's little moments throughout your day or throughout your week or throughout the month or year that really brought you a lot of joy in that present moment. It's okay if that joy, that peace, that feeling doesn't last all day. That's why it's called a glimmer. And that's kind of how gratitude works. That's why I like these gratitude journals that people do, where it's like you write down 3 things that you're grateful for. One of them could be, you know, I've got a cup of coffee in my hand. You know, I think a lot of people also twist it and say, oh, well, you know, if you aren't grateful for something, but you have so many other things, like how can you be a certain way, you know, or how can you feel that way when you have this and someone else doesn't? And so gratitude can be such a slippery slope in that regard. But I think it's more so focusing on the little things that you are grateful for throughout the day. That doesn't mean that you're not suffering in other ways. That doesn't mean that maybe you didn't have a really hard day. But I do think that when individuals start to change their mindset of, yes, I may be in a really rocky situation in my life right now. I may have something going on. I may have just lost a job, lost someone in my life, you know, dealing with some sort of sadness, trauma. When you do think of one small thing to be grateful for in that day or in that week, it's a glimmer of hope, you know, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It is going to get better. But it is a conscious effort. You know, it doesn't just come to you naturally. It is something that you have to work on. And I think that that's really important to notate as well, is that gratitude is an effort.
It is. You totally,
it's an effort.
I like glimmer. I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
But it is. I mean, even though, because now I can connect the dots for me. When I was in the darkest place in my life, I mean, one of the biggest things for me was seeking out glimmers of hope. Little moments of gratitude throughout the day were what got me through, because I think a lot of times, you know, doubt is that seed planting that leads to feelings of hopelessness, and hopelessness when you don't feel that there's any way out. Yeah. That's what leads to suicide. And I've been there. So I know what that feels like. But having little glimmers of hope infused into your day, into your life, is what gives you that ability to hold on, to like hold on and get through another day. So it's not downplaying whatever somebody's going through.
Not at all.
But it's recognizing it's both, right? Like you can both be struggling and consciously try to put in even just a little bit of effort.
One thing.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
So what did you get out of therapy? What has therapy done for you?
Yeah. So I think, you know, again, we're still so fresh with this current therapist, but the change that I have seen and felt in myself, in my thought process, even in my physical body, I just feel more relaxed, more present. And I think the thing that's really, and again, everybody goes to therapy for different things. My biggest thing was dealing with my anxiety, my obsession with perfectionism, and the difficulty of being present, which if you think about, they're all kind of working against each other. If you're obsessed with being perfect at one thing, you're not going to be present when you're doing that thing. So therefore can't be present if you're obsessed with perfectionism. And then the perfectionism, the obsession with that leads to anxiety. So it was the 80-20 thing really helped me of letting go. So
that was one mentality, 80-20. Okay.
The 80-20 thing really helped me of letting go with the desire to have everyone like me, because it's just not possible, and accepting the things that I cannot change. One thing that she had said to me was, you can want to change someone or something so badly, but it will not change unless that person or that thing is willing to change themselves. And it's a very simple way to explain it. It's not anything new that we've heard before. But when you really do think about it, it's like, oh yeah, I can try to fight this thing as hard as I possibly can. And it does not matter. It's not going to change if it's something to do with outside of me.
Right.
And so no longer directing my focus on the things that I can't change and focusing more inward on the things that I can change and the things that I do have control over has really helped me to just feel a lot more grounded. And I just become a lot more confident and comfortable in myself and my flaws. I used to have self-confidence, but if I would do something wrong, I would let's say I missed a count in a spin class and we started too late. I would think about it for the rest of class. The rest of class, I wouldn't be able to focus. I'd go home. I'd talk about it to everyone. I mean, let's not even begin with class pass reviews. If I would get a negative class pass review, I don't know how celebrities do it with all of the negativity. I got one negative class pass review and I just wanted to spontaneously combust. It was the worst thing to ever happen. And also, class pass reviewers should be a little nicer, because some of the things that I'm seeing out there are just horrendous. They like to hide behind their animosity and it's horrible. But I will say that being confident in who I am, even when it's not how I want to be represented, or even when I make mistakes, has really changed my mindset. Because again, it's just coming back to being a human.
Yeah, I think it dulls the edge of the blade a little bit, because in speaking, I do a survey, and 99% of the time, everyone is so positive and loving. And you, every now and again, you get just that harsh, mean comment, and it hurts. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm so above that and so zen that doesn't bother me. But the mentality, I love the 80-20, actually putting a label on that helps even me. But then the other thing is, I would always say to myself, if this person has something mean to say about another human being, I can only imagine where they're at in their life right now and how they must be hurting. And it doesn't change that I still remember what you said in the comment, and it still hurt me, but it dulls the blade a little bit to say this person is probably really hurting, or their emotional maturity is at a different level than mine, or just something to sort of take all of that ownership off of you. Because I think that's what we do, right? That's what we're discussing, is that somebody leaves that negative comment and that's an attack on you, and that's all of it's your ownership. And if you were just a little bit better, then they might not have left that comment. That's not true at all.
It's so true. Yeah, absolutely. I actually, and I'm going to butcher the number, but that's not what matters about this really anyways. But I read this thing the other day that I was like, oh, wow. So let's say you have $81,460 in your bank account. Do you know this, what I'm about to say?
I think so, but yeah, okay. Go for it.
Yeah. So let's say you have $81,460 in your bank account and someone steals $10 from you. Are you going to get rid of all of the rest of your money down to zero to be able to get back at them, to make them suffer for the $10 that they stole from you? No, you're going to move on with your day. It's $10. You got $10 less in your bank account. You're fine. that is how many seconds we have in a year. So it's like 81,460 seconds in a year.
I didn't know what the tie-in was.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And so if someone says something or does something to you that takes 10 seconds out of your day, are you going to throw away the rest of those seconds just thinking on that one person that took such a small amount of time away from you? No. So when you put it in that perspective, and it's kind of the same thing about, if you're not going to think about it or worry about it 5 years from now, don't spend more than 5 minutes on it. And I do like that mindset because we spend so much time on things that really are so minuscule that aren't going to matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so remembering that and trying to take that with you when it comes to people and when it comes to public speaking and teaching or whatever it is, any encounter you have with someone that may not have sat right with you, try not to think about it more than those 5 minutes, because chances are that person's not thinking about it at all.
No,
and then
they're
it's
not.
only negatively affecting you, and what for? There's what outcome is that? You're going to think poorly about yourself. You're not going to fix it. You're not going to fix their representation of you. And it's like you said, most of the time, negative things that people have to say about you is a personal insecurity being reflected about that person.
Yeah. And I love that example. And I'm also going to bring up, I think it was Theodore Roosevelt who talked about like the person in the arena with their like face all smudged with like mud. And basically it's the idea that like, it's super easy to be the outside critic to the people that are actually out there doing it. And that's the thing that I always remind myself of is like, basically if I get a negative piece of feedback, the first thing I do is like, I'm aware like, okay, this just hurt my feelings. Like I'm not going to sit here and deny. And I would have done that in the past. Oh, that didn't. And it just allows it to linger. So I'm like, that hurt my feelings. That was mean. And then I try to pivot a little bit to logic. Is there anything in this feedback that's actually helpful, actionable? Yeah.
Yes.
Like, did somebody just say it in a mean way, but like there's actually something beneficial here?
Absolutely.
If it's a yes, okay, cool. I'm going to try to pivot to logic. This person was a dick about how they said this, but whatever. What's the thing I can improve? If it's just somebody being hateful, then I sort of pivot to like everything that we're talking about. 80-20 rule. Anybody who's going to leave a mean comment is like there's something going on with them. And then that Theodore Roosevelt quote, which I'm going to butcher it, but it's basically just the concept of like, it's super easy to be the critic in the stands, pointing the finger to the person who's actually doing it. Yeah. To your point, you've got 86,000 and some change. Is it minutes in a year? Is that what it is?
Maybe it was minutes. I don't know if I said seconds or minutes. I would butchered it, but yeah, maybe something like that. Minutes sounds better.
Minutes sounds. Yeah. That's probably that. Maybe that's it. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
I don't know.
Regardless, we've got this like fixed amount of time, and so, like, also I've also found, and I don't mean to attack people that leave these comments, but I've found that people that are really judgy, they have their own insecurities and they're unwilling to try things and take risks themselves. And so I feel like it's their body and brain's way of releasing some sort of steam and some sort of like, it's their way of like releasing their responsibility of not living up to their potential and not trying their things out. That's why I think a lot of people, like, it's almost like therapeutic for them because there's so much built up frustration and anger at themselves for not living out their own potential because of their own insecurities and fears. So they just have to dump it on someone else.
It's so true. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think you're absolutely right, is that a lot of times, and again, because of how out there, social media is with everything, people's lives are pretty much on full display if they want it to be. A lot of times, and I know for me too, I would find myself like really jealous of people. And this was a couple years ago when I had like taken a hiatus for 2 years off of social media. And then I came back and like all these people were making all this money just from their posts. And I was like, what?
Yes.
And I remember I would look at these things and I would always come up with excuses. And this is me outing myself right now, because again, I'm a human.
No,
but I would come up with
this
these excuses of like, oh, well, that person only got that far because, they look a certain way, or they've got money from this, they didn't have to work for it.
Yep.
And I was like, what's the root cause of this? And I was like, I'm jealous. I'm jealous that that person has what I want.
Mm.
What's the solution? I need to work harder. That person's going to continue doing what they're doing. Me being jealous and envious of what they have isn't going to get me anywhere. So I need to start working harder.
Yeah.
And once I started working harder and putting myself out there and returning that time that I focused so much on other people, then inward to myself, I started to see the results and reap the benefits of the things that I wanted. You know?
Yes. And I'm so glad that you said that, because I think that that's very human. All of us have experienced that.
Oh yeah.
Myself as well. And I just think a lot of people don't do the introspection. And kudos to you for, rather than just taking those emotions at face value and being like, screw this person. Like,
yeah,
they just got this, you know, because I know that there's like, in the fitness industry, there's so many like fitness influencers, and oh, well, so-and-so blew up because of their parents or something, you know, or like they blew up in the pandemic because of this one thing. They got super lucky. And it's like you taking the pause to say, okay, well, where are these emotions coming from and why, and what is actually the solution that's helpful? And I will tell you, you know, people always talk about we live in a consumer economy. Like, people are always like, our economy is run on consumption, people going out and buying things and spending money, and that money circulating around in the economy. The biggest thing though for our millennials and Gen Z and every generation coming behind is that what we are really consuming is other people's lives at scale, and that comparison is happening at scale. And unless you have the introspection like you just demonstrated to say, okay, I'm feeling this way for this reason. Actually, I don't need to project this on this person, because I've done the same exact thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been like, I'm jealous of this person and what they're doing. And then I had to hit the pause button and be like, well, wait a minute. First off, I don't want to be like, I remember Kate was talking to me about this guy out here he's like a custom, he's a custom home builder.
Oh, cool.
And so he has his own home that he's custom built, and it's freaking awesome. And she showed me all these pictures and blah, blah, blah. And then that's what he does. And I was jealous.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, wait a freaking minute. Time out. Here's this human being just out there in the world doing the
his thing. Yeah.
That he enjoys and likes. And he's not thinking about me.
No.
He doesn't even know who I am.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a custom home builder.
No.
I don't even know what that entails. Like, he made the house look really good.
Yeah.
Kudos to him.
Yeah.
But that's not my path. And like, if I would just pivot and channel my energy back into, to your point, you know, the working harder aspect. But for me, it was just more of like, I just need to focus on what my path is. That's it. My path is here to help people with their mental health and to provide them with different mindsets and mentalities and different talk therapies and different treatment modalities. I just want to help people, because when I was at my lowest point, that was what I needed. I needed help from other people. So he's helping people in his way, and I'm helping people in my way, and that's it.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. And that's interesting too, because that kind of goes back to ADHD and your mind kind of fleeting to different things constantly.
Yeah.
You're never, from what I've learned, is that you're almost never satisfied with just being good at the one thing or just being able to do the one thing. You're like, I want to be able to do all the things.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a veterinarian like 3 years ago. Yeah. I wanted to go back to school to be an interior designer because I like watching interior design shows and I get a kick out of like designing my home. And then it's almost coming back to those things where it's like, yeah, pursue your passions, of course, but also for me, knowing that is a trigger for me of like, it's okay if your hobby is watching it on TV and you like to go to Home Goods and maybe decorate your house. You don't need to do it for a living. It's cool, you know, like recognizing that as well. But also touching on that kind of like seeing things on social media. I believe that every person on this earth can be successful. You just have to have the motivation and perseverance and the determination to do it.
Yes.
You know, I think a lot of people, including myself for a very long time, felt that I was entitled to some sort of success by sitting on my couch and not doing anything about it. And it's like, success isn't going to knock on my door and drop off a package and be like, here's your career for forever. Congratulations. You know,
Amen.
You just won the jackpot.
Amen.
And I know that gets a lot of backlash because it's kind of like the Kim Kardashian, like, get your fucking ass up and work, which is not what I'm saying. And coming from a person like her, I can understand. But it's the perseverance, the determination piece. You have to want to work for it.
Yeah, you
know,
you
it's
do.
Everything leading up to it. Most, I should say, I shouldn't generalize but most successful people, you learn about their story, where they came from, what they had to do to get to where they are. They didn't just walk in a room one day and be like, this is it for me. Now I'm successful. Like, one of the ones that really stands out to me is Drew Carey, who was the host of Whose Line Is It Anyways for a while.
Yeah.
He didn't even bust onto the scene until he was like in his late 40s. And he used to have to donate blood plasma to be able to afford food.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
He did every single thing he could to pursue comedy, but to also make money. And I'm not saying people should go out there and like donate blood plasma, but at the time he couldn't afford his rent. He knew what his passion was, though. He knew that he had what it took. So he did everything he could in order to set himself up for that. And now look at him, you know. And a lot of people think too, and I know for myself, I'm 26 years old and I'm like, oh my God, I don't have it figured out. I'm screwed. And there are so many people that don't get successful until way later in life. Yeah. And that's okay. Like my grandpa, I was just talking to him over Thanksgiving, and I always look at him like, oh my God, he started his business. He's traveled to like basically every single country in the world. He's so successful. He set himself and his family up for success. And I didn't realize that he didn't even start his own company till he was 60. He didn't leave the country till he was like in his mid 60s, and he's 95.
No kidding.
And has lived the most incredible life. But he had to work his ass off until he was even still, he goes to work every day, but 60 years old. That's when he started his own business and really started to see the fruits of his labors, you know. And me as a 26-year-old being like, oh, I'm out of time. This is it for me. Like, that's it, you know, and it's not the case at all.
Sarah, what you're bringing up though is so relevant. Mm-hmm. It's so, because I speak to 18 to 24-year-olds primarily, but this has happened with me too. Like I remember in 2018, when I had a mentor come into my life, and he was like, and he got my story out of me about my mental health journey, and he was like, you know, would you be interested in potentially sharing this with college students? And I thought about it because I wasn't sure if I wanted to be public about it or just keep it to myself. And I had sort of told myself through my journey, like, if and when I get to a place where I feel like I can help others, I want to help them somehow. But I just didn't know what it was going to look like. And once I decided, okay, yes, I want to share my story, I want to help other people, it was like something in my brain was like, you need to be an immediate success overnight.
Yes.
This sense of entitlement that I look back on in 2018 and 2019, it makes me cringe because it's so cringy, because it's like, dude, how dare you? You made a decision that you wanted to share your story, and now all of a sudden you think that you're qualified to be the one to just free everybody from their mental health challenges, and that you should just blow up on Instagram and blah, blah, blah. The entitlement. And it honestly, crazy. It's embarrassing. Like when I think back, I'm embarrassed by that, because I understand the whole, like, people don't want to hear the work hard anymore, but that is a part of the equation. I mean, it's a part of the equation. That and patience and persistence you talked about, and also just an awareness of where you're at in the journey. And I think one mentality, since we've been so heavy on the mentalities today, is like, I had another person on the podcast, and one of his beliefs is like, you're exactly where you're supposed to be right now. Like, life has lined you up to be exactly where you're supposed to be right now. You might not see what the future has in store for you, but taking solace and having peace with knowing everything is going to be fine. You're lined up. You're where you're supposed to be right in this moment. And like in 2016, when I was experiencing the onset of OCD, like I could not see that where I was exactly where I was supposed to be, because life was preparing me for something bigger. But like that still applies to this day. Like, I don't think I've arrived, and I think that there's so much more work and persistence and just things that need to be done. And I think that that requires patience and an awareness that, like, how dare I think that I just deserve to just have everything. It's like what you're talking about.
Yeah. But look at also how much weight that holds of, you know, years ago, you're in this place and you're like, how can life bring me here? This isn't where I want to be. Yeah. This isn't what I want to feel. I don't want to be contemplating certain things in my life. I don't want to deal with this. What do you mean I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be? That's not fair. Yeah. You know, and then you think about it and you had those glimmers that, you know, brought you to where you are today. And look at how many people you're helping. You know, it was a picture so much bigger than I'm sure you could have ever possibly thought of. And so that's why I really like to focus on the small gratitudes. You know, if you're in a place in your life where things are really difficult, focus on the small glimmers and they will get you through. They remind you that there is something bigger, and that's what you're meant to be. You know, that's where you're meant to be. That's what you're supposed to be doing, regardless of what that is.
I agree. And that's sort of been one of the secrets in my life too, is like the little things. That's the answer to, I think, to the happiness equation, is like zoning in on the little things in your life. Because I feel like every milestone that I've achieved in this journey, like I'm happy about it, I'm grateful, but then it's like, what's next?
What's next?
And until you start focusing on the small things, but it's like what you said, gratitude is a daily thing. It's something you have to work on.
It's an effort.
It is. It's an effort.
You know, it doesn't come naturally to a lot of people, and to some people it does, but I think that's a really important connotation, is to realize that it takes effort to be grateful for things, you know?
It does. It does. This has been such a fun conversation.
It's been so great.
Yeah. I love these mentalities. I think that this is a good place for us to stop and we can have many more conversations, but it's the 80-20 rule, detachment, reframing things in a way that serves you, having gratitude for the small things. So many beautiful mentalities that we talked about today. So where can people find you and stay connected?
Yeah. So on Instagram, mostly. I can only focus really on one social platform at a time.
Yes.
So Instagram, it's _ Sarah Amaral. So Sarah spelled traditionally, and then AMARAL _ first, at MOXI. So I teach, if you're local to Orange County, I teach at MOXI Fitness Studio that's in Costa Mesa. I teach indoor cycling, HIIT training, and strength training. So lots of different opportunities to hang out with me physically in person. But yeah, if anyone ever wants to chat about, you know, the things that we covered today, I'm an open book. I'm more than happy to meet up with people, chat with them whenever they want. But yeah, I would say that those are probably the two best places. I'm at MOXI pretty much every day, but also I got my phone pretty handy on me a lot of the times too. So anyone can always reach out to me with that too.
Nice. That's awesome. That's awesome. You've got great energy. So I think people would benefit from going to your class. But if they don't feel that way, that's on them.
That's okay.
Right? We can't control that.
Exactly. That's okay. Just be nice to me on ClassPass. Okay. If you guys have anything negative, just talk to me after class. I take constructive criticism very well, believe it or not.
Yeah. And if you're one of those people that leaves mean comments, what's hurting in your life?
Yeah.
What do you need
Don't take it out on me, okay?
Yeah. What do you need to work on? So let me ask this final question. What is one piece of advice you would give someone who is right at the start of their mental health journey?
Well, I mean, always therapy. You know, that's going to be my first and foremost, because again, I'm not a therapist. And like, I know I keep saying it, everybody and everybody is different. So whatever you're dealing with needs to be catered specifically to you. But I would say for me, my biggest piece of advice is remind yourself that you're a human and we all have flaws. There's not a single person on this earth that's going to do or be perfect at anything. And realize that there's never going to be another one of you ever on this planet in existence. And I think that that's what makes every single person really unique and really special. And so, you know, regardless of what they're dealing with, or you, whoever's listening to this, is that there's only ever going to be one of you, you know, and that's really special and it needs to be celebrated. So we need you here. We need you around.
Amen. I love that. I love that. The humanness in all of us, to tie it all back to the beginning of this conversation.
All we are. Just a bunch of humans trying to figure it out.
That's right. Well, Sarah, I appreciate you so much for coming on to the You're Not Alone podcast, and we'll definitely have to have you on again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Zach, and for having me on. I know I'm not an expert, but I really appreciate just the openness that you are providing people and to have the conversations that we're having. I think that it is so important that it's talked about more to let people know that you're not alone.
100%. It gets back to just being human.
Exactly.
Nobody's an expert. We're all just trying to figure it out.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Zach. It was such a pleasure talking to you.
Same to you.
All right. Speak to you soon. Bye.